you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, you see that little subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. Go ahead, click the subscribe button. New clips, new videos going up every single day. Also, we have an Aaron Torres Pod NCAA Tournament Survivor Pool that we're running right now. It's simple. Pick a team every day. If they win, you advance. The only catch, you cannot pick the same team twice. $20 to enter, minimum $500. But the more of you who enter, the bigger the pot gets, maybe up to thousands of dollars. So link, show description. Now, the video you came for. Just minutes before we went live, a topic and a conversation that we have had for weeks now has been resolved. The question, we have discussed it, we have debated it. Who was going to be the next Indiana head coach? We talked about Chris Beard. We go back to the Brad Stevens days, okay? We talked about Brad Stevens. We talked about Chris Beard. We talked about TJ Otzelberger. I told you why Rick Pitino wasn't taking the job. Dusty May. You know, you think about where we were in mid-February when Mike Woodson resigned. Well, on Tuesday, we got an official answer to who is going to be the next Indiana head coach, as West Virginia coach Darian DeVries has taken the Indiana head coaching job. He will be your next Indiana head coach. And I'll just be real, Hoosiers fans. When his name emerged over the last couple of days, I wasn't totally sure. But as time has gone on, I actually think that I really like the hire. And I think that he is going to be the guy that you need for this team and for this program. And by the way, for anyone who says, oh, Torres was going to say nice things, whatever. Go back to when Mike Woodson was hired. I said I didn't like it. I didn't think it was going to go well. So I'm not just saying it because Indiana hired a guy, okay? But I believe this is the right guy at the right moment in time for Indiana basketball. So let's go ahead and break it down. By the way, for Indiana fans who have found this page or found this YouTube video, Torres on Indiana for your late-breaking Indiana news. Also, we need help running our Torres on Indiana page. If you're an Indiana student, a college student that loves Indiana basketball, email me, Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com. Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com. We need an intern to help us run the page. Our interns a lot of them have gotten jobs in the media. It's a great internship opportunity. Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com. We need an intern for Torres on Indiana. With that said, let's dive into the hire. And so listen, as far as like the surprise of this hire, I don't think it's really that big of a surprise. Okay. So first of all, as the list got whittled down, listen, Brad Stevens, I never thought was taking the job. We did Flight Tracker for a day with that, but it wasn't happening. Dusty May signed the extension. I never thought he was taking the job either. I don't think Dusty May is a fishbowl, all eyes on you kind of head coach. And by the way, I kind of said the same thing with Ben McCollum. You can go back to a few days ago. We did a segment because there was talk that Brad Brownell was going to get the job at Indiana. And I said, Brad Brownell will be a disaster. It will be Shiano Sunday at Indiana if Brad Brownell gets the head coaching job. But I also said, I don't think Ben McCollum, I don't think that's the spot for him, okay? Because at the end of the day, Ben McCollum, small town guy from Iowa. And the thing about Ben McCollum was this. This was a guy that took forever to leave the D2 ranks altogether. I think there was a story I heard him say where when he took the Drake job, he actually went to bed and on that night almost decided to not go to D1 because he was so happy at Northwestern Missouri, okay? And so when you're happy at the D2 level and it took you 6, 7, 8, 9 years to even get to the D1 level, I don't think you're going to just jump to a mega job, whatever. That's not a knock on Indiana, by the way. I know there's a lot of people in the media that have criticized Indiana fans. I'm not going to be one of those guys. I think the passion, the excitement, the enthusiasm for Indiana basketball is great as long as a coach knows what they're getting into. Listen, I know there's a lot of negativity about Indiana fans. Matt Painter ran his mouth. I totally disagreed with what Matt Painter said. I think he's got to worry about his own fan base. I know the Umar Ballo comments from a few days ago weren't great, but there are bad fans in every fan base. But what I'll tell you is this. and I'll say this, Indiana fans, I go on with Dan Dockich all the time. I love Dan. I know some people in Indiana don't like him. I love him. I think he's the best. Okay. But Dan and I talked about this on his Indianapolis radio show about 2-3 weeks ago, is that some coaches just aren't built for Indiana, for Kentucky, for UConn, for Alabama football, for Ohio State football. But what I will also say, a lot of coaches love it. And not only do a lot of coaches love it, let's even take it a step further. Okay. Most coaches would rather go to a place where the fans care too much than not enough, where you have to beg people to come. Nobody's ever going to have to beg you to come to Assembly Hall in Bloomington. And so I never thought Ben McCollum was the guy. And I'll be real. When Darian DeVries' name emerged, at first I was like, I just don't know. But as I've thought about it more, and as I continue to think about it, I actually think that I like this hire a lot more than I realized. First of all, the number one thing is exactly what I just said. Darian DeVries is from the Midwest. Obviously, for people who don't know, he's originally from Iowa, was a Creighton assistant forever, goes to Drake, wins at Drake, goes to West Virginia. We know about what happened at West Virginia on Selection Sunday, and goes to West Virginia. But he was a guy that wanted this job, okay? I think the last couple of days has been interesting. He puts out a statement about the West Virginia stuff, but then there's talk about him interviewing with Iowa. Pete Thamel says that he is no longer a candidate at Iowa. To me, that said he was getting this job. But I think first and foremost, he knows what he's getting into. He knows what he's signing up for. And listen, whether it's Dusty May, whether it's Ben McCollum, these guys might be great X's and O's coaches, but if they're not built for the 24/7 spotlight that is Indiana basketball, then I just don't know that you want that guy as your head coach, okay? And so it's not that they're not great coaches. It's just that this guy knows what this job's about, knows what to expect, knows what expectations are, and is going to be ready for the challenge. I think beyond that, I think we got to look at what he did. Won at Drake. I know a lot of people win at Drake, but was very successful there. By the way, before his son even came, won a conference regular season title, didn't get, gets to the tournament in back-to-back years. And I think what he did at West Virginia this year is as impressive as anything, and I don't think he's going to get enough credit for it. But first of all, just like he's about to at Indiana, he went to a place where there was no players, where the team was coming off a disappointing season. It was a worse situation than what he's going to inherit at Indiana, okay? Goes to West Virginia, builds a roster in one offseason, and immediately puts together a team that I think when they were fully healthy was about a top 25 team. They go to the Bahamas. They beat Gonzaga. They go to the Bahamas. They beat Arizona. Now, I understand Arizona isn't quite what it once was, Arizona wasn't quite then what it became later in the year. It doesn't change the fact that a win over Arizona is really good. By the way, that was technically a non-conference game, but you get the point. And then, oh, by the way, when they were pseudo at full strength, they went to Fog Allen Fieldhouse and won. And so, yes, by the back half of the year, they struggled, but that's what happens when you have injuries. That's what happens when you have Tucker DeVries out for the season with an injury starting in mid-December. And so, to me, you look at how this all played out. You look at the fact that you have a situation where he took over a very similar situation, no players, whatever, immediately won in a very tough league, should have been in the NCAA tournament. By the way, I find it very ironic, as I know everybody listening does. I think West Virginia and Indiana were the two best teams and two teams that should have been in the tournament. I said all week, if I was a one-man committee, I would have had West Virginia, Indiana, and UC Irvine in, North Carolina, Texas, and Xavier out. But I just bring it up because how about them apples? Indiana misses the tournament. They choose not to go to the NIT. Then Darian DeVries and West Virginia get left out as well. And you now have a coach 2 days ahead of schedule. So to me, I think this is a great move. I think what has to have you excited is a few things. First of all, I'm a firm believer. One, you got to know what you're getting into in a job. We just talked about that. In some ways, it reminds me of Mark Pope at Kentucky last year. What did Mark Pope say at his opening press conference? What did he say? He said, I understand the assignment. Darian DeVries understands the assignment, okay? So that's one. Two, and this is as important, he now gets a head start on all this portal stuff, okay? First of all, he gets to meet with the team. We know that a lot of guys are graduating. He gets to decide who he wants to keep. Now, as we were coming on air here, Malik Renew officially entered the portal. Doesn't really mean anything. He can come back if Darian DeVries wants him. Gabe Cupps entered the portal. He can come back if Darian DeVries wants him. But a couple things. Darian DeVries is going to take his son with him, Tucker DeVries, who, oh, by the way, was averaging like 14 points and 6 boards on 47% three-point shooting before he got hurt. So you're adding an NBA caliber player there. And then he can get a head start on this portal, where I know the portal isn't technically open yet, but let's remember, one, everybody is talking to everybody. So even if guys aren't in the portal yet, you're kind of getting a feel right now for who will be available. But then two, and this to me is the important part, is that you also can start talking to guys that are able to enter the portal. Remember, you get to campus, you can talk to your guys. On top of that, don't forget that all these coaches that got fired, all these places that there have been coaching changes, you are allowed to talk to those players. And so whether it's guys from Iowa, whether it's guys from whatever, you can talk to those guys. They're allowed to be in the portal right now, and you can start getting a head start on this roster. So I'm really excited to see who he retains and who he brings back. Listen, I'm done being in the world of you need to bring back this guy. Mark Pope didn't bring back anybody from Kentucky's roster last year. It worked out pretty well for him, I would say. Arkansas brought back Trevin Brazil. That's it. It worked out well for them. Kevin Young at BYU brought back a bunch, and it worked out well for him as well. So in a perfect world, like I said, Malik Renew entered the portal. If I was prioritizing guys, I really like Miles Rice. I know he didn't shoot the ball well. I know he probably didn't pass the ball well enough, but I think another year with him, he'd be really good. Malik Renew is kind of a, not a really big three. He doesn't shoot the three, okay? And he's a little bit undersized. I don't know what his intentions would be, but I just bring it up because there's plenty of talent in that building. But if you decide that you don't want to keep him, you don't have to. But I will say that I do think that this is a good hire. By the way, something just happened in that opening game of the NCAA tournament. I don't know what it was. Let's see here. I don't know. Whatever. But I like the Darian DeVries hire. Indiana fans, congrats. You deserve this. And I think he's the right guy. I think the last thing I was going to say, all these schools, whether it was Kentucky, whether it was Louisville with Pat Kelsey, like I said, you need a young guy. You need a guy that gets modern college basketball, that gets the portal, that gets NIL. I've used this example a million times, but, and it's a fitting example for Indiana. Like a guy like Tom, you don't want the 60-year-old dude that's the coaching veteran. Sorry, Tom Crean. I think you belong in a studio at ESPN. Sorry, Seth Greenberg. I think you belong in a studio at ESPN. You need young, you need dynamic, you need dudes that accept that, hey, NIL is here. Portal is here. Rev sharing is here. How are we going to figure it all out? And I think that's an interesting last development with Indiana. We did a segment a few weeks ago. And in it, we talked about how Indiana, Scott Dolson, their AD, has said, we are going to be at the top of rev sharing. In other words, whatever is the most you can spend in rev sharing for basketball, we're going to be at the top of the list. So he's going to have plenty of NIL to work with. And listen, I love the Mark Pope hire a year ago. I love the Pat hire a year ago. I think Indiana got their version of